Tell me what's the difference when tryna get it on your own. Born rash, yeah, gotta go and get rash long. Can't forget about the times I was hung out alone. Now I'm getting to the money and I'm rocking all these shows. Never mind the things, I'm pulling on, rocking on designer jeans. Fucking on the bitch, and you know she slipping all on the dick. Counting on the rash, yeah, I'm on my shit. Closer to the stars, how I life. What you gon' do, tryna give her 2 lives? On my knees, yeah, I'm tryna get it right. Fighting all the demons all around me. So what you gon' do is you gon' fight. Gotta be well protected. Separate all the wrongs in my life. Gotta be well respected. Keep a pistol on my side. Drive off in that Lexus. Swerve off and go get high. Tell me what's the difference when tryna get it on your own. Born rash, yeah, gotta go and get rash long.
Disclaimer. The opinions expressed during this podcast are conversational in nature and expressed only in comedic and entertainment purposes. Not all of the facts will be correct, but we attempt to be as accurate as possible. At least I think we do. My bad, y'all. Theater holds no liability over these conversations on this podcast, and using this podcast, you understand that it is solely for entertainment purposes only. Enjoy the damn show. Laugh, love, live, and smile more, because we about to. We are. Wait. This is not loud enough for me. There we go. There we go. We are back with another episode of You Don't Pay Me Enough to Care, and I'm your hostess with the most, this Sebastian Sincere Harris, like everybody knows. Everybody's wondering where Raina is, but Raina has been working quite a lot lately, and today we have a special guest. She goes by the name of KRISTIAN Weatherspoon. She's an AKA alumni from Mississippi. So you went to college for film, or is it film?
I went to undergraduate for English, actually.
English, okay.
And I went to graduate school for broadcast journalism.
Okay, that's what I have. That's what I have on my paper.
Yep, so
okay,
really similar.
So let's tell the audience who you are and where you exactly from, and let's take it from there.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I am KRISTIAN Weatherspoon,
right.
And I hail from the great state of Mississippi, Jackson to be specific.
Right.
I'm born and raised, a really proud Mississippian, really proud Jacksonian, attended Jackson State University, and am a huge advocate for my home state, my hometown, and just the idea that some people think not a lot of great things come out of Mississippi, but I am here to prove them wrong.
Awesome. So that's how long you been in Atlanta?
I've been in Atlanta. This is my second stint living in Atlanta. Right. So I've been here for 6 years, but I moved here immediately after graduate school. I went to graduate school at Northwestern in Chicago, and after grad school I came here and started my career here in radio. Okay. And when I finished there, I missed home and wanted to go back home and be near family, and so I went back home for 3 years and kind of did some more journalism work. I did some policy work, and then I came back to Atlanta. So I've been here for 6 years.
So from Mississippi to Chicago to Atlanta.
Mississippi, Chicago, DC, Louisiana. So I've lived and worked a number of places. Absolutely. So, but I love it.
Yeah, because I wanted to touch bases on. I read something in an article, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I had to do a little research when I do these things.
For sure.
But it said that while you were in Mississippi, you were also building digital campaigns and efforts to improve the lives of Mississippians. Can you go and elaborate more on that?
Yeah.
Like exactly what were you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was there, I worked for a health policy nonprofit, and so what the focus of that nonprofit was basically doing education around issues of healthcare. And so, for your listeners, y'all know Mississippi is a really rural state, and kind of once you get outside of Jackson, it gets very rural really quickly. And so, most like a lot of really rural states, we had issues. There are issues around like educating people about how things that happen in the legislature, how things that happen in the capital city affect them. And so I had just finished my work. I had just finished my degree about 7 months after the Affordable Care Act was implemented, was made a law. And so that was one of my, first jobs, was basically to do an issue campaign, which is basically going out to parts of the state that don't have a lot of access to internet and talking to people face to face about like, hey, and talking to them about, like, this is how this impacts you. These are how these issues are really impacting you. There are a lot of people in rural Mississippi who had never had access to health care because it's we're a poor state. It's a poor state. And so, that shows up in a lot of different ways. But yeah, that was the work. And so a part of it was digital issue campaigns. Really specifically, I go out to cities, and I would talk to people. I would talk to them about what the new healthcare law meant for them. But then I would also collect their stories, and they would talk to me about some of the issues they've been having around healthcare specifically. And so what I did with that content was basically kind of turn it into use storytelling basically to educate people in the state. So you think about it, if you're living in South Mississippi, you may never talk to people who live in the capital city who legislate these issues. And so I was able to kind of compile their stories and turn them into something that I could share so that everyone was educated about like how these issues of healthcare and other issues impact people all across the state. So it's kind of like what I do now.
So do you still do any of that? Like,
I would like to think that an extension of that storytelling work is what I do here. Like, I've always been a storyteller at heart. And so I tell people I grew up in a really...
Creator.
Yeah, right.
You're a creator.
Exactly, I am. I grew up in a really large immediate family. And we told a lot of... As most black families do, you tell a lot of stories. It's like, that's what you do on Sunday. That's what you do when you're hanging out with your family.
You're right.
And so I learned really early that, everybody has a story. My parents I have older parents. They're in their 70s. And so they grew up in the era of civil rights. And like seeing this kind of stuff happen and seeing the things that we have read about in history books and things that we talk about here happen. I have an uncle who's 80 plus years old, and he he met civil rights activists, and he was part of people, part of groups that helped to organize black folks to vote. So, all that kind of stuff, like, it's a story. Everybody has a story. So that's always what I wanted to do.
So you wanted to tell stories, but have you ever thought about like doing like, well guys, hold on, let me give you guys a briefing on, she just did an awesome documentary. We're going to touch base just a little bit on it because I want you guys to go see it and check it out. It's phenomenal. The filming, the editing, the people that's in it's very diverse. It's called The Monuments of the Untold Stories of Stone Mountain. She directed and she executive produced this documentary. It's awesome, and you guys can find it on the AtlantaHistoryCenter.com. And it's actually on YouTube, but I'll put the link in when I post this. I'll put the links and everything where you guys can find that. Okay, so have you ever thought about like making movies, like being in like the movie industry itself? Or
I have not, and I'll tell you why. Because at my core, I enjoy the idea of like not having huge staff, huge crews to have to deal with. I like the idea of being able to kind of take on something that I can handle, that I can reasonably work with. And when you get into the Hollywood space, like it's a whole different animal. And honestly, I want to be able to tell the stories that I think are important. And sometimes, kind of when you get into that space, it gets a little bit more difficult. But I mean, you have Ava DuVernays out there who've made it work, who've been able to get
more money, more power. People think they can control everything.
So I love the idea of being able to kind of tell the stories that really, really need to be told. So I'm enjoying the space I'm in right now.
That's awesome. So what other by the documentary you just did that I touched on, have you done anything else because that was pretty huge and I really enjoyed that? Because see, look, I'm really not a big documentary fan because they're so boring. Like, and I was sitting there like, okay, if I'll get bored with this, I'm going to go back and go in the control room and go to sleep. So I normally, if I do watch a documentary, it's more of like space because I'm like very like outer space, and when it comes to creativity, of course, that's my love space. Like, so.
For sure.
Was this by far one of the biggest things that you've done so far? Have you done anything else on this line, or?
Yeah, absolutely. This is certainly the biggest project that I've worked on, to date in my career. I can totally say that. But yeah, I've done documentary work before. Yeah. So like I said, I've been immediately after graduate school, I worked in field production. So I produced some TV shows. Okay. So I have some context for that.
What kind of TV shows can you tell? Did you sign any contracts? Because every time somebody get on my show, they have did something that's in the media, and they be like, well, oh no, I can't really say like what I've done because of contracts and
yeah, I mean, but that's a real thing for sure. But no, I did not sign any NDAs. I'm not that high profile, y'all. I'm not that high profile. But no, the TV I produced was a kind of news and politics show, and it's not even on the air anymore. But it was on the network PT.1. And so it was a show that they talked about like politics and news. And so it was actually, I went to New Orleans and spent some time there producing shows about the anniversary of Katrina. But I read that. Yeah, but I finished school around the same time that the oil spill happened in the Gulf. Okay. And so obviously it impacted so many people in Louisiana. So a part of that production work was really was producing a TV show that talked about like what was the impact of the oil spill on people in Louisiana. So it was a show on TV1, just a news and politics show on TV1. It was called Washington Watch.
Well, that's good.
But it's not on anymore.
Now you know I'm gonna go watch it.
It's online. You can actually find the episode with my production credits there, so you can actually find them there. But yeah, but also in this other position I talked about before, when I was back home doing policy work around healthcare, I produced a documentary there specifically, and it probably was. At that moment, it was kind of the biggest project I'd worked on, but spent the better part of about a year just traveling around Mississippi and talking to people who had limited or no access to health care, and really talking about what their stories and kind of what their struggles had been, and turn that into a documentary that is also online.
Have you wrote any like script formats or anything yet?
I haven't written like TV show treatments. Okay, then. Yeah. Well, see, you're better than me.
I've been in that. When I was in high school, I used to deal with like drama and acting. I came to Atlanta. I was actually doing acting when I first got here. Yeah. And then I ended up going to music school, but that's a whole other story. Yeah. But
it's all right there in that same creative space.
Media has always been my thing.
Yeah.
Media.
Yeah. Right.
So okay, so guys, look, if I forgot to say something, because this lady has a strenuous long list of accolades that she has up under her that I done my research on. And let me touch bases on this again. Once again, this is the Vice President of Digital Storytelling at the Atlanta History Center. So yeah, guys, I'm going to keep saying that throughout here, because I forgot I left that big part out, like, this is the Vice President. So, but, and like I said, I appreciate you coming on this show.
Of course. Thank you for asking. I'm excited to be here.
Let me see. So we got into, so your awards. I saw a few awards that you got. You had got one for the Georgia Associated Press. Yeah. And what was that for?
So that was a story because in my first, one of my first earlier jobs in my career was in public radio here in Atlanta, and so that was a story about immigration in South Georgia, and so it was in like 2009, I think, and it was kind of that time where you're hearing a lot about. These raids by ICE and them basically kind of going into these, immigrant heavy communities and deporting people. Yeah, and so I spent I spent about 4 days on a blueberry farm actually in South Georgia. And so what I would do is that we'd make connection with the owner of the blueberry farm. And so his issue was that he was struggling because ICE, when they were doing these raids, yeah, they were taking people and deporting them, but these were people who worked his farms. These are people who picked blueberries and people who basically helped to harvest his crop. And so that was the issue. And so it's one of those things I would like to tell people, like, nothing happens just happenstance. Like, there's always kind of a domino effect with issues like that.
Right.
And so, yeah, as these raids were happening and they were deporting folks, well, there were farmers like him in South Georgia who didn't have people to harvest their crop. So that was a problem. And so, he had given us access to the farm, and so we ended up talking with people, with a lot of the workers there who were deathly afraid of being deported. And it wasn't about them. It was that when they would get deported, they would leave children behind. They would leave families behind. And so just to think about families kind of being separated, that was kind of the gist of that story. And so it ended up winning an AP award, but it contained both audio, some photography, and just a lot of like written storytelling. But it was a really interesting, probably one of the most interesting things I'd ever been able to see up close and personal.
Because you be getting to the nitty